I've never been one to believe in these things. I've always been the kind of guy who faces everything with both feet on the ground, you know? 20 years on the road, I've seen it all: muggings, accidents, people freaking out on the side of the road. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that day. It's been 3 months, and I still wake up in the middle of the night with the image of it stuck in my head. Sometimes, it feels like the smell of diesel and blood is still lingering in my cabin. I needed to get that out of my system. So I decided to write about it here, even though I know a lot of people will think it's a lie. I would think so too, if I hadn't lived it. It was a normal Tuesday. I picked up a load in Tucson and was heading towards Flagstaff. The sun was beating down on the road, the radio was playing some classic rock. Everything was going well until that stretch of Interstate 17, near a quiet exit. I saw some strange movement on the shoulder, a woman standing there, a little lost, who seemed to be trying to cross. She was dressed in white, with her hair down, and she didn't look to either side. She just pulled into the lane. I didn't have time to brake. I swear on everything I tried. The impact sounded dull. I felt the truck shake as if it had run over something huge. I stopped the truck with a jerk. I jumped in despair, already knowing it wasn't going to be good. And it wasn't. She was lying on the asphalt, her body all twisted, eyes open, but not as if she was afraid. I was staring at the sky, as if I already knew that was going to happen. I stood there in shock. I called emergency services, I tried to do something, but it was too late. The paramedics arrived, performed the procedures, questioned me, and cleared the scene. They said it was an accident, that it wasn't my fault, that she was probably having an episode or something. But from that moment on, something inside me changed. It wasn't just guilt. It was like something had been ripped out of me on that road. I continued the journey, but the road was no longer the same. Every gas station I stopped at, every stop to fill up or eat something, it felt like there was something watching me. You know that feeling of being watched, even when you're alone? That was it. But it got worse every day. I thought it was stress, trauma, I don't know. Until, at a small stop, in a place called Camp Verde, I went to the gas station bathroom. And when I looked up after washing my face, she was in the mirror. Behind me. There was no sound, there was no wind, just that still reflection. She was there, wearing that same white dress, her hair wet and disheveled, and a smile, a sad smile, that didn't seem angry. It sounded like a lament. I turned around right away, but there was no one there. After that day, I started avoiding mirrors. I know it sounds ridiculous, but every time I saw my reflection, I kept expecting her to be there again. And sometimes, even without a mirror, I saw her. Like, in the reflection of the truck window, in the shine of the gas station glass, even in the still water in a puddle after a rain. Always the same look. There was no blood, no wounds. Just that pale, sad, almost disappointed face. As if she expected something from me. As if she was judging me for having moved on, for continuing to live while she had stayed there, on that strip of asphalt. One day I slept inside the truck, in one of those isolated rest stops in the middle of nowhere, near an open field. I woke up in the middle of the night to a noise outside. I thought it was some animal, or another trucker trying to steal cargo, I don't know. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing about 10 meters away from the cab. Her. Standing, motionless, looking straight at me. I couldn't see her expression clearly, but I knew it was her. The headlights made everything a little distorted, but that dress and her soaking wet hair left no doubt. I locked the doors and huddled in the seat like a kid. When I got the courage to look again, she was gone. At times like these, your mind starts to play tricks on you. You start to doubt your own sanity. I tried to get back into a routine. I tried to talk to a company psychologist, but I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone that you're being followed by a dead woman who appeared in your rearview mirror? Just thinking about it makes me sound crazy. I started to lose weight, sleep badly, and walk around with sunken eyes. My colleagues on the train would comment, but I would just shake my head. Even my wife started to notice that I was different, but how could I explain it? Honey, remember the woman I ran over? She's following me. I didn't want to hear the answer that would come with it. Things got unbearable when I stopped at a roadside diner in Prescott. It was one of those classic places, full of truckers drinking coffee and eating pancakes at 6 in the morning. I sat by the window, ordered a coffee, and tried to take a deep breath. The waitress came over with the cup and looked at me strangely. Before she left, she said softly, "She's behind you, right?" My stomach turned. I didn't know this woman, I'd never spoken to her in my life. I asked her what she meant, but she just smiled strangely and walked away, as if it were normal. That broke me. If someone else saw it, then it wasn't all in my head. That day, I decided I needed to go to the scene of the accident. I didn't know what I was going to do, I just felt like I needed to go back there. I took a detour and went to the exact spot on the road where everything had happened. When I parked the truck on the shoulder, it was incredibly silent. No cars passing by, no sound of wind or birds. Just that dry, still heat. I got out and walked to the place where her body had been. I knelt down and put my hand on the asphalt as if that could bring me some answer. I stayed there for a few minutes, breathing deeply, waiting for something. And then, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around slowly. She was there. Closer than ever. She seemed more alive. But her gaze was the same. Sad, but now there was something more. She seemed tired. She didn't say anything, she just stared at me. And that's when I felt it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't accusation. It was as if she wanted me to acknowledge what had happened. For me to accept it. I stood there, staring at that still figure, until, out of nowhere, she simply turned around. She started walking away, slowly disappearing into the light of the road, until she disappeared completely. As if she had been carried away by the heat of the desert itself. Since that day, I never saw her again. Not in the mirror, not on the road, not in the reflections. Nothing. Life went on, more or less. I still carry the guilt, of course. This isn't going away that easily. But you have something different now. As if that presence was gone because I finally faced it head on. Or maybe she was just waiting for me to come back there. I don't know. I just know that after that, everything stopped the same way it started. No explanation. No logic. It just stopped. And to this day I don't know if all of that was real, or if guilt is capable of shaping the reality around us. I wrote this because there are still days when I wake up and look in the rearview mirror before I even leave the garage. There's no one there, of course. But the feeling stays. Maybe it will stay forever. Sometimes I think that if I had braked a half second earlier, none of this would have happened. But there's no going back. There's no way of knowing. What I do know is that there are things the road takes away, and others that it gives back to you, even if you don't want them to. If you've ever lost sleep over something you did by accident, maybe you'll understand a little of what I experienced. Maybe you'll also look twice in the mirror, just in case. Have you ever felt like you were stuck in a place with no way out, even though you were moving? Like, you drive and everything seems the same, like the world has gone on autopilot? I've always been skeptical about these haunted road or parallel dimension stories, but what happened to me that night made all of that seem less absurd. And I've been driving all over the United States, alone, for almost 15 years. I've seen some pretty bizarre things, but nothing like this. To this day, I can't explain it. All I know is that ever since then, I avoid any route that goes through the interior of New Mexico. It was supposed to be a smooth delivery. I picked up a load in Las Cruces and had to leave it on a farm near a small town called Magdalena. Nothing else. I did what I always do. I filled up the tank, checked the tires, put on a podcast and left in the late afternoon. The GPS said the journey would take just under 2 hours. Everything is fine so far. But when the sun began to disappear behind the mountains and the sky turned a strange reddish hue, I noticed that the road began to seem repetitive. At first I thought it was tiredness, but something didn't add up. It was like I was going through the same stretch over and over again. I realized that something was really wrong when I looked at the GPS. It said that I was only 10 minutes away from my destination. But that message didn't change. 10 minutes. No matter how much I drove, it didn't slow down. 10 minutes. Half an hour later, still 10 minutes. 1 hour, same thing. I looked around. No signs, no intersections, no headlights of cars coming or going. Just a straight, empty road, with the same kind of dry bushes and old fences on both sides. I tried to zoom in on the GPS, restarted it, even switched apps. Everything showed the same, 10 minutes left. That's when I started to sweat coldly. I stopped the truck at a random spot and got out. I needed to stretch my legs, clear my head. The road was too quiet. No wind, no crickets, no sound of tires on the asphalt. Just the sound of the engine turning off echoing in the distance. I walked a few meters, looked up at the sky. There weren't even any stars. Just endless darkness. I took out my cell phone to try to call someone, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. That was strange enough, because as far as I knew, this route had coverage. I got back to the truck with that feeling that something was wrong, like a tightness in my chest. When I started the engine and checked the GPS again, there were still the same damn 10 minutes left. I kept driving. There was nothing else to do. The road was an endless straight line, with no wide shoulder, no detours. And the strangest thing is that the truck showed no signs of failure. The tank was full, the dashboard was normal, only time seemed to not move forward. The evening light had turned to dull darkness, as if night had never fully arrived. And yet, the clock showed more than 3 hours since. There were 10 minutes left. My body began to enter a state of absurd tension. My eyes hurt from looking straight ahead so much. The landscape did not change. No new stones, no pieces of rubbish, nothing. All the same. It was only when I started to think about stopping again that I saw something different, a sign on the right side of the road. I was relieved for a second, until I realized the sign was completely blank. No letters, no numbers. Just the metal structure, as if they had forgotten to write what it was. I walked past it slowly, looking closely, but there really was nothing there. And the worst part is that, 5 minutes later, I saw another identical sign. Same height, same distance from the runway, also completely blank. I started to feel like a rat in a maze, trapped in a test I didn't even know I was taking. I started to accelerate. Nothing absurd, but above what I usually do at night. If it was some kind of GPS glitch or something, maybe if I broke a speed limit something would unlock. But nothing changed. Neither the time nor the route. It was like running in place. Until I saw a light further ahead. It was short, yellowish, and seemed to come from a small building, like a gas station or a house on the side of the road. That gave me instant relief, like when you see dry land after being lost at sea. I got closer, and my blood ran cold. Because it was a gas station. But it was the same gas station I had seen hours ago, on the way out of Las Cruces. I stopped the truck again, now completely disoriented. I ran into the gas station. There was no one there. The lights were on, the sign was flashing, everything was working, but there was no one there. The clock on the wall read 7:48 p.m., the same time as when I had started driving. I opened the drinks fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and felt my whole body shake when I realized it was warm. I looked to the side and, in the reflection of the window, I saw my own face, but there was something wrong with my eyes. They were sunken, as if I hadn't slept in days. As if something was draining my energy inside. I left the gas station completely disoriented. I went back to the truck like someone going back to a shelter in the middle of a storm, but I didn't feel safe inside anymore. I started the engine on impulse, as if it would pull me back into a false sense of control. The GPS, of course, still said 10 minutes left. I felt like throwing the device out the window, but the fear of getting completely lost was greater. I decided to drive one more time, even though everything inside me was screaming not to do it. The road was still the same, the bushes, the ground, even the sky was still. A pitch black that didn't seem like night, but a complete absence of time. Suddenly, everything went dark. As if someone had turned off the world around me. The headlights no longer illuminated anything. I could see the dashboard lit up, I could feel the engine vibrating, but what was outside was an absolute void. No lines on the road, no shadows. Just a dense black that seemed to absorb the light. I screamed. I don't know how long I stayed like that. It was as if time had stopped. Minutes? Hours? I have no idea. All I know is that, out of nowhere, the light came back on. The road reappeared, the entire landscape, and the GPS, this time, showed arriving at destination in 2 minutes. I looked around and recognized the entrance to the farm. I delivered the load like a zombie. The farmer didn't notice anything strange, signed the papers and thanked me. I asked what time it was. He said, "It's 7:52 p.m. In other words, it had only been 4 minutes since I left Las Cruces, even after hours stuck on that road. I got back in the truck, sat on the seat and stared ahead, trying to understand. But there's no way. It doesn't make sense. All I know is that, since that day, I've avoided any delivery that goes that way. I've changed my routes. Even if it takes longer. Even if it pays less. That road, it's not here. Or maybe I wasn't here when I was on it. If you've made it this far and think I'm making this up, that's fine. I would think so too, if I hadn't lived through it. But every time I turn on my GPS and watch it calculate a route through the middle of the New Mexico desert, my heart races. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. Whenever I see that 10 minutes left message, I turn the device off immediately. Because I know that if I keep going, I might never come back. Or worse, I might come back, but from a place that shouldn't even exist. I've never been the kind of guy who gets scared easily. I grew up in a garage, I've driven all over the country, I've been caught in a blizzard in Dakota, a storm in Texas, I've been chased by armed men trying to steal cargo. Nothing really fazed me. But there was a trip, about 6 months ago, that completely threw me off balance. It wasn't the kind of fear that makes you scream or run. It was a quiet, heavy fear that follows you silently. A constant feeling that something is wrong and you only realize it when it's too late. It started with a silly thing, which I even thought was a defect in the truck, the weight sensor in the passenger seat. It was an ordinary night. I was on my way from Bakersfield to make a quick delivery in Reno. A path I've taken dozens of times. I turned on the radio, put a coffee in the holder and started spinning. The truck's dashboard started beeping, as if there was someone in the seat next to it without a seatbelt. I looked at the empty seat and laughed. I thought it was a sensor failure. This happens sometimes with these newer versions. Anything on top of the seat is already active. But there was nothing there. Nothing. Not a backpack, not a jacket, nothing. Just the clean bench. And yet, the "no seatbelt" sign remained up. I pulled over to the side of the road, turned everything off, and then turned it back on. The warning went away. I thought I had fixed it. But when I got back on the road, not even 5 minutes had passed before the warning came back. Only this time, the seat sank. I saw it. It wasn't my imagination. The foam sank as if someone had sat there. My heart froze. I looked at the seat, expecting to see something, but there was nothing. No shape, no shadow. Just the mark on the upholstery and the damn warning on the dashboard. My first reaction was to laugh nervously, to make fun of myself. But when I looked back at the road, I felt a cold on my right arm. A real cold, as if someone was right there next to me, breathing close to me. I wanted to stop again, but something made me continue. I don't know how to explain it. It was as if the presence there next to me kept me moving. As if stopping was worse. And the most bizarre? The radio started to crackle. I was listening to a classic rock station, but suddenly, there was this thick static, and in the middle of it, a voice. I couldn't quite understand it, it sounded distant, muffled. I only understood one sentence, repeated twice, almost like a whisper, "You weren't supposed to be here." That gave me goosebumps from head to toe. I immediately turned off the radio, but the silence inside the cabin got worse. Heavier. As if someone was actually there, quiet, watching me. As the miles passed, the presence seemed to grow more solid. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. A heaviness in the air, like when someone walks into a room and changes the atmosphere. The seat was still sunken, and even with the dashboard warning me, I couldn't look to the side for long. Every time I tried to face the seat, something would stop me. My eyes would drift away on their own. As if my body knew not to see what was there. I started to sweat coldly, even with the air conditioning on full blast. And the cold on the right side continued, constant, as if that presence had its own temperature. Or absence of temperature. Things got unbearable when I stopped at one of those rest stops to take a breath and try to understand what was happening. The place was completely empty. I got out of the truck and went to the bathrooms. On the way back, I looked out the passenger side window and I swear to God, there was a handprint on the glass. A large mark, with long fingers, kind of whitish, as if it had been left by something cold. The thing is, the glass was clean when I parked. And I was alone the whole time. That made me freeze. I didn't get in the truck right away. I stood there, trying to think rationally. But the most rational thing at that moment was to accept that I was no longer alone in there. I gathered up my courage, climbed back up and decided to drive to the next town, no matter how far it was. But things got worse. The radio started to hiss again, even though it was turned off. The screen was blank, the buttons were dim, and yet static filled the cabin. And in the middle of it, whispered voices. I couldn't make out any words, but there were several. Layered whispers, as if many voices were speaking at once. I covered my ears and started screaming, but nothing could drown it out. It was only when I started praying out loud, and I'm not even religious, that the sound suddenly disappeared, as if it had been plucked out of thin air. All that was left was the noise of the engine, and the seat was still sunken. When I finally arrived in a small town and parked at a well-lit gas station, the passenger seat went back to normal. Out of nowhere, the upholstery rose back up as if the person in it had stood up. The dashboard stopped beeping, the cold disappeared. And for the first time in hours, I felt like I was truly alone again. I stood there, hands shaking on the steering wheel, staring into space. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed inside the truck, awake, just hoping it wouldn't come back. But to this day, every time I start the engine, I look at the seat next to me before I drive off. Because I know that, somewhere down the road, it's still waiting for a ride. I went home after that delivery, but I couldn't get it out of my head. I tried to tell my wife, but I stopped halfway through. How do you explain something that you don't even understand? I only talked about the sensor and the radio, leaving out the details. She thought it was just fatigue. Maybe it was. But what about the handprint? And the voice on the radio that was turned off? For a while, I thought about taking the truck in for a checkup, to see if it was an electrical problem, a faulty sensor, who knows. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. It wasn't the truck. It was the road. And something that night decided to come with me and sit in the seat next to me. I went back to work after a few days, trying to act normally. But every time the panel beeped for anything, my heart would race. And he had a night a few weeks later when the unseated passenger sign came on for a second. Just a second. But it was enough for me to pull over to the side of the road and take a deep breath for almost half an hour. He had nothing else there, the bench intact, no cold, no voice. But the memory of that day was still fresh, as if it had just happened. There was something at that moment that marked my mind in a way that not even time can erase. I don't make deliveries at night anymore. I changed my routes, adjusted my schedule. It may seem like an exaggeration, but after what I've been through, it's no longer just a question of tiredness or safety. It's instinct. I felt it next to me. I saw the seat sink. I saw the handprint on the glass. I felt the cold air slowly spreading. And even though nothing so direct has ever happened again, I still feel, every now and then, as if someone is there, silently watching me. As if they enjoyed the ride. As if they're just waiting for the next chance to sit next to me again. If there's one thing I've learned since then, it's that there are places on this road that don't belong in this world. Sometimes, we cross a line without realizing it. Sometimes, someone crosses it with us. And when that happens, there's not much you can do. Just keep going, pretending nothing has changed. Until the seat next to you sinks again. And you realize that you'll never really drive alone again. I've always been a fan of driving at night. Less traffic, fresher air, that feeling of silence that only dawn offers. But there's one thing I've never liked, electrical storms. Not because of the rain itself, but because of the thunder. They have always made me restless since I was a child. My mother said it was because I was born during one. Maybe it is. But that night, in the middle of a delivery between Kansas City and Oklahoma, I discovered that the problem was never the sound of thunder, it was what can come along with it. What happened on that trip has no logical explanation. And it still haunts me every time I hear a storm approaching. The forecast was already calling for heavy rain, but it didn't seem like anything too serious. I turned on the radio, tuned it to AM, as I always do to follow traffic and weather news. Everything was normal until the first sequence of lightning flashed across the sky. A violent crack, and the radio made that familiar hissing sound. But then, between the crackles of static, something strange appeared. It sounded like a voice. Low, slow, a bit drawn out. At first I thought it was interference, maybe a poorly tuned station. But the voice became clearer. And then I heard, "You lied to her, and she knew it." That sentence paralyzed me. It was something no one could know. Something old, buried, that I had spent my life trying to forget. When I was a teenager, my younger sister disappeared. And I never told anyone that night, she came to me asking for help, saying she was afraid of someone, and I sent her away. I said it was drama, that she was looking for attention. That was the last time I saw her. Until my parents died, I carried that guilt alone. I never spoke of it. Not even to my wife. But the voice knew. And it spoke in a calm tone, as if it knew me. As if it were there with me in the cabin. I tried to change the station. I turned the dial, turned it off and on again. But the voice kept coming. And the worst part, every time the thunder struck, it came back louder. "You pretend to forget, but you remember every night. You lied at the wake. You dream about her underwater." I started to sweat. The windshield was barely keeping up with the rain. Lightning streaked across the sky like blades, and the radio seemed to vibrate along with it. It was as if the storm was bringing that voice, as if it were using the thunder to get closer. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was dread. A dread that came from within, as if the road itself had become a confessional. I started talking loudly, to myself, trying to drown out the voice. I turned on the radio on my phone, turned up the music to full volume. But it was no use. The sound of the storm swallowed everything. Lightning lit up the road like camera flashes, and each bolt seemed to make everything clearer for a second, the dashboard, my shaking hands, the sweat dripping down even in the cold. The voice on the radio changed tone. It wasn't just accusation anymore. It was as if she were surrounding me. "You could have stopped it. You knew. She called you by name." And that's when I froze. Because the voice pronounced my name the way only she could say it. My sister. Danny. I nearly lost control of the truck. I swerved, stopped on the soaked shoulder, and stood there, panting, the wipers flapping frantically, the radio now just blaring. I opened the door, climbed out with my already soaked feet, and let the rain hit my face hard. I screamed. I cursed at nothing. I cursed the road, the storm, myself. I tried to rationalize, maybe I hadn't slept enough, maybe it was stress, delirium. But what broke me was the sound I heard when I climbed back into the cab. The voice whispered once more, only this time, it was right next to me. Not on the radio. Right next to me. "Danny, you left me alone." That sentence destroyed me. I started crying like a child. I didn't know whether to ask for forgiveness, scream or pray. I just huddled there in the seat, with the thunder crashing outside and that invisible presence inside the cabin. I couldn't see anything. But I felt it. The passenger seat was wet, as if someone had been sitting there soaking wet. The window started to fog up, but only on her side. I just stared at the dashboard, trying to breathe. I felt the air around me getting denser, colder. My whole body felt numb, as if I was sinking into something that I couldn't get out of. After a while, I don't know how long, everything stopped. The rain eased, the radio went silent, and the seat next to me seemed normal again. I tried to start the truck, and it started right away. I drove back down the road in silence, shaking, with the feeling that something had left me. But not completely. It was as if a part of that night had stuck to me, like smoke in my lungs. When I got to my destination, the loader asked if I had been caught in heavy rain. I just nodded. I didn't have the courage to tell him anything. I don't even have the courage to do so today. I'm only writing here because, on the last trip, I heard the radio whispering again. And there was no storm at all. I spent weeks trying to understand that. I heard similar stories, I read reports of people who said they heard voices, but nothing came close to what I experienced. The voice knew too much. Details that no one ever knew. Phrases she had said when she was little, secrets from our childhood. There was something there that went beyond fear. It was like someone had found me through guilt. And the worst part is that I don't know if that was a warning, a demand, or a punishment. I only know that after that night, the radio was never just a radio again. Every time I call, I wait for that voice. Even on clear days, even with blue skies. There was a moment, about 2 weeks ago, when the radio turned on by itself. I was standing at a gas station, in the middle of the night, dozing off. It just turned the stations on its own until it reached a low frequency, and then I heard, "You still remember." It was her. And this time, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stood there, listening. The voice repeated it like a mantra. "You still remember." I realized that maybe that was it. Maybe she just wanted me to not forget. To not have it buried like another dirty secret. Maybe this is my penance, to remember, for the rest of my life, what I did, or didn't do. Since then, I no longer listen to music while driving. I leave the radio off. Just the noise of the road, the sound of the engine. But even so, sometimes I feel that cold in the cabin. That silence before something starts. And whenever it starts to rain, especially when it flashes, my hand goes straight to the radio button, even without wanting to. It's a reflex. A part of me wants to hear it again. Another part prays that it never happens again. But the truth? I know it will. At some point, during any trip, in the middle of a storm, it will speak to me again. And when that happens, there's no point in running, turning it off, praying. Because it's not stuck in the radio. It's stuck in me. In what I didn't say, in what I hid, in what I left behind. The road takes its toll on everything, sooner or later. And there are things that neither time nor distance can erase. All that's left is to keep moving forward, until the next thunderclap. There's a bridge in the middle of Alabama that I'll never cross again. And I've already crossed it a good 10 times before that happened. It's one of those old structures, made of rusty iron, with poorly painted signs and the sound of metal creaking when you drive a heavy truck over it. The road that leads to it is isolated, surrounded by dense forest and deep marshes, the kind that you know if someone falls there, they'll only find it days later. I always thought the place was a bit strange, but since it was the shortest route to a delivery in Mobile, I followed it as usual. But that night, something changed. It was quiet. The sky was cloudy, the air was heavy, and a strange fog was starting to form as I approached the bridge. The first thing I noticed was the truck's headlights illuminating some strange shapes on the sides of the structure. I thought it was dirt or vegetation, but as I got closer, I saw that they were hands. Lots of hands. They were clinging to the edges, as if they were trying to climb up. Pale, thin hands, with their fingers outstretched. I stopped the truck in the middle of the bridge, the engine still running, and stood there, frozen, staring at it. I couldn't see their faces, just their arms, writhing, trapped on the edge of the iron. My reaction was automatic. I jumped out of the cabin and ran to the side of the bridge, screaming, thinking someone had fallen, that they needed help. But when I got there, there was nothing. No hands, no bodies, no sound of rough water. Just the fog engulfing everything, and the muffled sound of the engine running in the background. I leaned over and looked down. The marsh was covered in thick fog, and the silence was so absurd that my own breathing seemed too loud. I stepped back and looked back to the side of the bridge where I had seen the hands, and everything was clear. As if nothing had happened. I got back into the truck, still not understanding. I sat down on the seat and looked in the rearview mirror, trying to think. That's when I saw, in the side mirror, a figure passing quickly behind the truck. I thought someone was there with me. I got out again, walked around the truck with the flashlight in my hand. Nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone. Just that thick fog and the low sound of water dripping down below. I got back in and decided to continue on my way, accelerating slowly until I got off the bridge. But when I looked in the rearview mirror again, I swear on everything I saw a pair of eyes staring at me from behind, standing in the middle of the bridge. And I couldn't see the face. I accelerated like never before. I didn't even care about the weight of the load, I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. The fog seemed to swallow the road behind me, as if it wanted to pull me back. When I stopped at the next gas station, about 40 minutes later, my hands were still shaking. I went downstairs, went straight to wash my face in the bathroom, and only managed to look at myself in the mirror after a good few minutes. I tried to convince myself that it was tiredness, an illusion caused by the fog and tension. But then I noticed something. There was mud on the side of the truck. Dark, thick mud, as if someone had climbed into it with dirty hands. And that stopped me again. The problem was that I had washed the truck that morning. It was clean, shiny, ready for delivery. And that mud wasn't the kind you'd find on the road. It had a strange, strong smell, like something rotting. I went back to the back of the truck and, using the flashlight on my cell phone, inspected every corner. I saw thin marks on the bumper, like fingernail scratches. Nothing deep, but enough to give me goosebumps. And it was there, parked in the darkness of that empty gas station, that I began to remember the rumors that some older truck drivers had told about that bridge. People who disappeared there, abandoned vehicles, reports of screams coming from the water. I never paid much attention to these stories. I always thought they were just talk to scare newbies. But now it all made sense in a sick way. I went into the gas station convenience store and asked the attendant if he had heard anything about the bridge. The guy looked at me strangely, was silent for a while, and then said quietly, "You stopped there, right?" I just shook my head. He looked away and said, "You paid attention. That's all they need." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but it stuck in my head like a buzz. I went back to the truck and decided to call it a night right there. Sleeping was impossible, but I had to try to rest. That morning, I woke up to a noise on the roof of the cabin. It was like something was scratching lightly, very slowly. I stood still, without breathing. The sound stopped. After a while, I looked out the window and saw nothing. But at dawn, there were small handprints on the windshield. Marks from the outside to the inside. As if someone had tried to get in. I drove on with my stomach in knots, without looking back. But in the rearview mirror, every now and then, that bridge seemed to still be there. As if I had never really left it. As if there was still someone hanging on, waiting for me. I returned home after that trip certain that I would never travel that route again. I changed the route with the company, made excuses, and even asked to move to a different region. And yet, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that I am back on that bridge. The sound of the water below. The metal creaking. Hands reaching up. I tried to keep going, but the truck was never the same again. Even after washing it, replacing parts, and checking everything, a new mark or scratch always appears that I don't remember causing. It's as if something had gotten stuck there. Or worse, as if it had come with me. I did some more research on the bridge. I found out that it was built on what used to be an indigenous cemetery, and that during a flood, many bodies were swept into that swamp. They say that, ever since then, the bridge has been a kind of passage, not just to the other side of the road. But no one has officially confirmed anything. Just loose stories, anonymous testimonies on forums, people who disappeared and reappeared days later with no memory of it. Most people prefer not to talk about it. And now I understand why. Because there's no way to explain it. There's no way to convince someone that they saw human hands trying to get out of the swamp in the middle of the night. I tried to go back there once, just to see it for myself during the day, to try to rationalize it. But I couldn't. When I got about a mile away, the truck just died. Everything went black. I walked back to the nearest gas station and swore I'd never try it again. That bridge doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to be avoided. But the problem is, once you see what's there, it seems to see you too. And then, it doesn't matter where you are anymore. Nowadays, I still hit the road. But I always keep my rearview mirror covered. Always. Because I know that if I look at the wrong moment, I'll see it. Even if it's just a glimpse. A pair of eyes in the dark, or those hands again, waiting. And the only thing that keeps me from stopping for good is the hope that if I keep moving, maybe they'll be left behind. But deep down, I know that a part of me is still on that bridge.